wrapping up some of our conversations around the Textile Bowl from this past Saturday. We certainly hope you enjoyed the Textile Bowl because it is no longer an annual event, as we learned with the ACC scheduling from Monday evening.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Wolfpack Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Wolfpack, free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Tuesday, happy Halloween to all. As always, I'm Grayson Boone, joined by former Wolfpack defensive tackle Kenton Gibbs. We promise not to get too spooky on this Tuesday episode. We do have another installation of a whole lot of nothing or a whole lot of something. We have our Locked On Look of the Week back again this week with one of the most impactful plays from the Clemson win on Saturday. And then, of course, the ACC scheduling model for the next 7 years has dropped, and we certainly have a lot of things to say about that. But without further ado, whole lot of nothing, whole lot of something. We have three more topics to cover, the first of which, in the fourth quarter, with the game winding down, of course, we saw Peyton Wilson endure a little bit of a leg injury. Coach Dorn noted that Peyton will be okay to play against Miami, but in his absence, safety Shawn Brown steps up to play linebacker and comes up with a couple key tackles in that final drive for the Wolfpack. Whole lot of nothing or a whole lot of something?
Whole lot of something. Shawn Brown has looked amazing in any position we put him in all year. If there's an award for the most versatile player on NC State's team, it has to be him. It has to be him. He has played multiple positions at multiple points this year. And here's the thing. He started at none of them, and he's excelled at all of them. And there has not been a time where I thought, man, Shawn Brown is just out there doing cardio. Don't know what he's doing. He's just doing stuff, just running around out there. He has consistently been a guy that's in the mix, doing good things. You know, you got to give him all his love, got to give him all his props because he's showing up big time.
Your defensive MVP is undoubtedly going to be Peyton Wilson, but if you had a runner-up, it has to be Shawn Brown because it seems at this point in the season he continually gets better and better every single week. And one of my favorite things I heard from Coach Dorn on Monday was saying if he could have 10 more Shawn Browns on the field at one time, then he certainly would. And that speaks volumes to the play that we're getting out of Shawn Brown. And again, this is not a guy that was a starting safety like you mentioned, Kenton. And he's just sort of found an opportunity with some injury problems we've had. He stepped up. He's showing out. He's playing additional positions and contributing in massive ways as well. So this is a whole lot of super something. Shout out to Shawn Brown. That's an incredible job he did filling in there on that last defensive drive. KC, Kevin Concepcion, accounted for 66% of NC State's total yards against Clemson. That's 134 of 202 total yards. Whole lot of nothing or whole lot of something?
Whole lot of something and not in a positive way. Somebody else show up. Somebody else show up. But not only somebody else show up, Anai, get in your bag, brother. Get in your bag because the way that you've gotten in your bag for KC has been impressive. Not going to lie. We're actually going to take a look at that a little later. But anyway, the way that you've gotten in your bag for KC is impressive. KC ain't the only talented player on this offense. He's not. And here's the thing. Would I say he's the most talented of all of our skill positions? Yeah. Would I say he's the most mature and ready of the players that I think are the most talented that were active in this last game? Probably, probably. But I think that there are too many opportunities to draw up things to get other guys open, to get other guys in rhythm, to get other guys in the game that we're just missing. That because we're so focused on getting KC the ball. And the other problem is, at some point in time, if you're a one-trick pony, people learn to stop the trick.
Yeah.
And not to call Kevin Concepcion a trick, but what if the pony gets hurt? What if the trick is no longer effective? Like, We're seeing this right now in the NFL. We talk about Deebo Samuel. We're seeing it right now with the 49ers without Deebo Samuel. Brock Purdy looks like Mr. Irrelevant again all of a sudden. That's what happens when you rely so heavily on one guy, one player, one thing that you can't get anything else, that nobody else is relevant when their number's called. Well, what if somebody else's number has to get called? Now, all of a sudden, are we just wetting the bed and just sitting there shaking in our boots, hoping that Peyton Wilson can get more pick sixes? That's not a sustainable offensive idea, with all due respect.
It's a whole lot of something because of how spectacular that KC has been, but it's getting to be on the fringe of a whole lot of nothing because, like you mentioned, Kenton, kind of my main point, we're going to get into a territory here where it'll be a fine line between creativity and predictability. A team like Miami, if they know that we can only rely on KC to move the ball down the field, they're going to take necessary measures to make sure we don't do that. And so it is a whole lot of something because of the way that Casey has carried this team as in just a freshman so far. But if we're not also making necessary adjustments to get the ball into his hands, but also this will turn into a whole lot of nothing because if a team is honing in on him and that's all we have to roll out there, it'll be a whole lot of nothing in terms of we're going to have a whole lot more struggle on offense than we've already seen so far. We're even going to talk about this more in depth later on in this episode, but the yearly Big Four is back. NC State, Duke, UNC, and Wake Forest is now an every year occurrence, but it comes at the expense of playing Clemson every year. The Textile Bowl is now not an annual occurrence. Whole lot of nothing or whole lot of something.
I hate to be that guy, but I mean, it's neither a whole lot of something nor a whole lot of nothing. I think that this is like, it's a neutral to me because it's the Textile Bowl leaving is a whole lot of something, but it's also a whole lot of something in terms of the state championship is coming back. The reality is, you're losing a lot, but you're gaining a lot. So to me, it's kind of like it's a fairly even trade-off. You know, I know a lot of people are saying, oh, NC State finally figures out how to beat Clemson and the Carter consistently, and all of a sudden we never get them again. And, you know, I get that. I get that thought. But at the end of the day, I think that this is like, I struggle to call it a whole lot of nothing because I think that it is important to get those teams in state playing each other all the time. But I struggle to call it a whole lot of something because, I mean, you still lose Clemson, which is a huge game every year, which was a game that we could always expect to be on ABC, night game, all that stuff that's off the schedule.
For me, it's a whole lot of something. And like you kind of alluded to, it is a big time give and take here because before all of this has now changed, you had folks saying, you know, why don't we play Duke every year? That feels like an easy scheduling decision to make that we have to play Duke every year. And a lot of folks have talked about missing the Big Four year in and year out because that used to be a yearly tradition. And now we're getting that, which I also think is a very good thing because I do want that in-state rivalry, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. But yes, it does come at the expense of losing the annual Textile Bowl. And for a lot of state fans, myself included, that's important. I want to see Clemson every single year because that is such a big game for the team and our fan base. Because, of course, for the last decade, Clemson has been one of the teams that we look forward to trying to beat every single year. And so when you take that off of the schedule, it's going to feel like a little bit empty, so to speak. It's going to be weird not playing them every year. And a lot of folks are looking at it as an opportunity. Well, okay, maybe the schedule looks a little easier. There's something to be said about that. But I don't want to necessarily call it running from the grind, but I want to see Clemson every year. I want to see Florida State every year. I want to see NC State play against the best. It is a whole lot of something. I'm still processing how I feel about it. By the time that you all listen to this on Tuesday, I might have already changed my mind, but it's a good thing to get this Big Four, but I am going to miss seeing Clemson on the schedule every single year. Coming up next, we have Kenton's Locked On Look of the Week, another great one to dive into. Talking about Robert and I, he's in the kitchen a lot more often than folks might think he is. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. Our first sponsor of the day is Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry about buying your tickets to the next big event. Gametime is the fastest and easiest way to buy the tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Gametime has deals right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less on another site, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And again, create an account and use redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, now time for our Locked On Look of the Week. Kenton has drawn up another masterpiece, the flat route that KC ran in order to have MJ Morris find him for the opening touchdown. Here we go.
Y'all know the deal. The first thing we do, if it's a run play, we look at the blocking scheme. But if it's a pass play, we look at the actual routes that were ran by the offense. So first thing first, this is a fairly flat rollout by MJ Morris. And what I think is very interesting here is Clemson didn't have the wherewithal to notice that our tight end on the end of the line of scrimmage here is covered up by Juice Vereen. So he's ineligible. 49, although he's, you think of him as a tight end, he's ineligible because he's covered up by Juice Vereen. And so here is the route pattern that we see. Now we got KC in motion, and he's motioning from the top of the screen to take this from 4-by-1 to quite literally 5-by-0. Coach Robert and I, what are you doing? Let's start there with the sicko behavior, right? You talk about Halloween, you talk about spooky. Five receivers to one side is legitimately unhinged behavior because technically speaking, Big Anthony Belton on the backside here, he's eligible. He's eligible because he's the end man on the line of scrimmage to the short side of the field, but obviously that's not where we go here. What we do is we get this rollout, and this is where I say Robert and I is in the bag. So we have the corner route by Juice Vereen, who is the furthest in the slot. You have Julian Gray running a whip route, which is basically you're faking a slant or an in, and then you're pivoting back out and getting back to the outside. And then you have a in that turns into a pick by Keon Lassane. Now, let me tell you how insane that is. Not only are you going 5-by-0, you are committing to your number one receiver on the outside, setting a pick for your wide receiver that's coming in motion. Robert and I, my brother in Christ, you were in a bag. You were in a Louis duffel. Let me tell you something. You were in the kitchen here, and I don't know about y'all, but I know when I smell those good oxtails, when it's about hour 10 of them things cooking, and the onions are good and ready in there, and the season is good in there, the browning sauce is good in there, and you can just smell that the meat's going to be falling off the bone. He was in there in the kitchen with that one because MJ Morris rolled out and hit a wide open Kevin Concepcion. Andy Air wasn't in the place today, but his twin brother Anthony was. Now let's look at what the defense did, and let's look at why this was such an amazing call by not. Clemson is known for bringing pressure, which they do on this play. They've got 6 people up at the line of scrimmage, and all 6 are blitzing. But I want you all to look at these lines on the defensive backs. Each line going to a receiver. And I want you to look at the black line, highlighting Wiggins from Clemson to Concepcion. Everybody is in man. This is man coverage, 0 across the board. This is our guy is better than your guy. But you know how you beat man coverage, Grayson? 2 different ways. Number 1, routes that keep your receivers in motion. And number 2, you set a pick. You set some type of motion or action that has one guy kind of not blocking. He's just running a route that happens to get in the defender's path. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And so in this man coverage, when you got 6 guys blitzing and a rollout, how do you handle it? Well, let's look at the blocking scheme for a second here. Now, as you can see, all 3 on the backside from the center to the guard to Big Belt and that left tackle, all 3 are taking a deep kind of slide set here because they know we're protecting MJ's backside. It makes no sense for us to try to stonewall these guys up front. and give them a potential easy win that way when we could respect that we're going to lose this battle slowly, but also respect the fact that there's no way they can get to MJ because we're doing this. The front side is where it gets interesting because this tight end, number 49, comes and blocks down on this defensive end here who doesn't expect him to block because, again, nobody from Clemson had the wherewithal to realize Juice Vereen is covering him. He cannot go out in the route. He has to stay in and block. So what ends up happening is, number one, Clemson has a guy that is in no man's land in coverage in terms of that safety in the middle of the field there that is right in where Wiggins is about to be. And we get an extra blocker to kind of take that defensive end. You know, it's like I like to call blindside blocks like a unexpected date or the man of your dreams in the romance novel. It's just going to knock you off your feet every time. And that's what happened to this defensive end here that allowed MJ Morris to have a clean edge to throw from. But I want to highlight this right here, okay? Because, again, the route pattern that we saw in the beginning, the corner, the whip, the block, and the end route that turned into a block from Lassane and the flat route from KC ends up like so. If you can see what's going on in this big block up here, or in this circle up here, rather, this highlighted dotted circle, there are two Clemson defenders on the ground, Keon Lassane standing up, and Kevin Concepcion with the ball. The nearest defender to Kevin Concepcion is about 6-7 yards away and on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, we got Andy Ayer's twin brother, Anthony Ayer, sitting in the end zone, ready to welcome KC because, again, Anthony, like Andy, has never made a tackle. He's never made a play. He just likes being out there running some cardio. And so what we get as the end result is this. Concepcion celebrating a tutty, which may be one of the easiest of his career because all he had to do was go in motion, hit the flat, and he was wide open. But a lot of love has to be shown to Robert Anae, first and foremost, for calling this play. What a wonky formation. What a wonky idea. But damn it, it worked. And talking about Keon Lassane, it's a real selfless thing you did there, brother. It's a real selfless thing you did there in terms of not only running the route to get in the way of the defender, but also doing such a great job of it. You get two defenders to run into each other, so there's no chance that you get called for an offensive pass interference because that's what you often see on plays like that in OPI because the receiver did a bad job of disguising his block as a route, and therefore it's instantly called as, oh, yeah, that's pass interference all day and tomorrow. So, you know, great job, great first touchdown, 7-0 Wolfpack lead. Way to go by Robert and I there.
You heard KC in the pregame videos that came out after the fact. He said, I need two of them things. That was the first one. It speaks to a greater point of the effort of Robert and I, again, to scheme the ball into KC's hands and did an excellent job of that against Clemson, which is even kind of surprising because you had to figure a defense as good as Clemson's is would know that we can really only go one reliable place with the football. And even Clemson wasn't able to stop it because of the way that we were scheming this up, getting creative with the wide receivers all on one side, or even having a backup linebacker play running back for a play, providing a massive block, opening up the whole side of the field for KC to streak for 50 yards on the ground. And so excellent job from Anae this season. He's been taking a lot of heat from some fans. I think not all of that has been warranted. Some of the play calling, yes, but when you see him truly draw something up as good as the play that Kenton just showed you, yeah.
Insane work. Insane work. Honestly, even if I was to say like, hey, my defenders are perfect and they have perfect knowledge of all the things happening around them, y'all don't realize how hard it is to pass off one guy to the next in terms of a 2-3 exchange. That was a 4-1 exchange. The farthest guy inside was exchanged with the farthest guy outside. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if a defensive backfield can execute that pass off in man-to-man coverage perfectly against a 5-0 set, that defensive backfield and that coach deserve everything that's coming their way. They deserve all the awards. They deserve all the love. They deserve all the praise because that's a concept that is not only extremely rare, but also a concept that is flatly, how do I put this? It's so unique that it's not something that you ever anticipate game planning for. And yet, lo and behold, there it was. So great play by Nye, great play by KC. The pass was exactly where it needed to be from MJ. Easy pass and rhythm, 6 on the board, touchdown, good guys.
Shout out to Robert and I. When he truly draws something up, when he draws up a masterpiece, it plays out exactly the way it needs to. It's like
it's a masterclass in the kitchen. It's chef work. I'm telling you. You got Wolfgang Puck, you got Gordon Ramsay, you got Robert and I. Okay.
Up next, we're going to finish our Tuesday episode going a bit more in depth with this new schedule model released from the ACC after a quick word from our sponsors. Our second sponsor of the day is FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's right, $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Rounding out our Tuesday episode, as we mentioned a bit earlier, the ACC on Monday evening released their schedule model for the next 7 years. This, of course, is with the additions of Cal, Stanford, and SMU into the ACC conference. And, of course, that has now shifted a lot of the scheduling that we were expecting to see of these next 7 years. But NC State and all the other teams in the ACC, they released their schedules. Here is NC State's from 2024 out to 2030. I'll just read you some of the highlights, of course. So, as we mentioned before, Duke, UNC, and Wake Forest are 3 teams that NC State will see every single year now, at least for the next 7 years. And Clemson in the Textile Bowl will go a little bit by the wayside, not away altogether, but we will see Clemson in 2024, 2027, and 2028. So only 3 more times in the next 7 years. That is a bit disappointing to hear, but going back to the point of having the Big Four in the state of North Carolina, I think that is a good tradition to bring back, especially for this entire state. I think it's such a good thing to try and reignite these local rivalries. The weird curse that we have with Winston-Salem, which I still think is going to be broken this year, but now seeing them every single year get a couple more cracks at it. Ultimately here, it is quite bizarre to see teams like Cal on here, like Stanford on here. I don't think we even see SMU until 2028. So that was probably the one team out of the 3 I was looking forward to seeing the most.
Same.
Having Clemson go away annually, I think we still see Florida State at a decent rate, but that's another team I would like to see year in and year out. And it's going to change the way we look at NC State's conference schedule, of course. If you look just ahead to next year in 2024, you have Duke, Stanford, Syracuse, and Wake Forest at home. You have Cal, Clemson, Georgia Tech, and UNC on the road. Purely on the surface here, that looks extremely favorable for NC State. That feels like a great schedule to try and take advantage of next year. You think about the divisions of the ACC going away. You just have 2 teams at the top that'll make it into the championship game in Charlotte. Maybe this does work out in NC State's favor in a sense that you can have a stronger conference record without seeing teams like Clemson and Florida State on a regular basis. I do think that should happen anyway, but
serious question. So does the conference championship stay in Charlotte?
I think it should.
Because let's say you got Cal and Stanford, just for kicks and giggles. Are Cal and Stanford fans traveling all the way to Charlotte? Never mind. This is Locked On Wolfpack. We'll discuss that on Locked On ACC. But I think that this is a very good schedule for NC State. I think that, coaches in this state are obviously very fond of the whole state championship thing and all that, and I think it's good that they have that back. I am saddened to see the Textile Bowl go, but honestly, I'm more sad to see Florida State not being a yearly thing anymore than the Textile Bowl, because that Florida State game, even when we got rid of divisions, it was like, man, that's tough to see go. But now with this kind of setup in here, it's like, ugh. But it's always good to have a Clemson or Florida State on your schedule, because good, bad, and different, they're huge draws, and those are the games that generally you'll look at and see that you find yourself in primetime TV for.
Yeah, you see, like Clemson here, NC State only sees Florida State also 3 more times in the next 7 years. That's extremely disappointing because being that Clemson and Florida State, they are, I guess you could call them like the crown jewels of the ACC conference. Maybe not anymore by the way that Clemson's trending now, but you want to see them every year because you want to be able to get up for those games in a raucous environment in Carter Finley. And only seeing both of those teams 3 times the next 7 years, it just feels like such a wind out of your sails type moment. NC State also has one of the more, I guess you could say, like evenly divided schedules amongst all these other schools. You see sometimes a school see another one 5 times. The most NC State sees another school is 7, of course, with our big 4. But then after that, it's Pittsburgh, randomly enough. We see them 4 times. My question is, how can you allow NC State to see Pittsburgh more often than teams like Florida State and Clemson? I feel like that's a big missed opportunity there.
Yeah, no, I 1,000% agree. The history is there, the rivalry is there and all that. But sometimes when you adjust to these wonky new schedules and worlds, that's kind of how it just ends up.
So, of course, many, many more conversations to have on this topic, but it is a massive give and take getting the big 4, but you're losing, I guess, more premier opponents coming to Carter Finley. Something to be said for that. You know, I don't care so much as having a primetime opponent come to Raleigh. I just want to win the game. Yeah, so in a sense, what I'm trying to say is with all of these new changes, it feels like NC State could find themselves in favorable scheduling positions as early as next year, going into 25 and 26 and so on. And so while you are getting the in-state rivalries in a sense reignited, you could potentially use that to fuel this program in finding yourself in a situation where you could go to Charlotte to play for something. And so NC State has got to find a way to take advantage of things like this. And as far as going out west, I've kind of talked myself off the ledge. I don't really care now because I think it sets up nicely for NC State in a sense that you really only have to do it like once a year. I think in 2024, we go to Cal, but Stanford comes to us. Whatever. I mean, it is what it is because it's too late to walk it back, unfortunately, at this point. So a lot of new look schedules to be diagnosed, but ultimately I will be sad to see Clemson go as a yearly opponent.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. That's a very valid thing, right? Like, that's not a problem at all. That's not something I'm looking at like, how could you be upset about? It's a very valid.
That will do it for us here on Tuesday. Wednesday's episode will be primarily basketball focused. Of course, the men have their exhibition match on Wednesday night. Very excited to see how we look there. Tweeted earlier on Monday evening, MJ Rice was back in the building at the Dale Center, practicing, maybe just practicing on his own. Regardless, he said that he is back in the Instagram story. That is very nice to see, but can't wait to see what this basketball team looks like. We'll be breaking down all of that and more. Thank you all so much for the support. We'll see you all tomorrow. Until then, go Pack.
Go Pack.